If you're watching this video because you're trying to make a decision on whether or not to buy Mushihimesama on Switch, I'm going to do you a favour and save you 10 minutes. This is an outrageously good port of an outrageously good game, and at $20 it's actually being kind of undersold. If the only reason you haven't already jumped on this is because you want to know if it's a good port or not, you have absolutely nothing to fear. Go get it, simple as that. Now the game was actually announced alongside Escaluda 2 and Dodonpachi Daifukatsu in the Japanese version of a Nintendo Direct. And not one of those little Nindies presentations, in a full-blown Direct, which is kind of incredible to be honest. Mushihimesama in fact was shadow dropped on the eShop immediately after the Direct, and I, like I'm sure a lot of people did, raced to my Switch straight away to download the game. Now I'll be honest, when I saw the price tag, which is about $20, coupled with the fact that no one seemed to know who Livewire, the company behind the release, were, I was slightly worried. That seemed to me too low to indicate a super high quality M2 style port, and my fear was this was going to be a bare bones zero div Psycho port effort, but with a cheekily inflated price tag just because it's Cave. But how wrong I was. Instead, what we have here is the same package as the Steam and 360 versions of the game, meaning there are fully 4 separate versions of the game to get stuck into. Of course, there is the original arcade version, there's also a very well worked novice version, an arrange version with a reworked scoring system, and the 1.5 or Matsuri version, which introduces its own further little twists, including the option to start fully powered up but with more aggressive enemies. To be honest, this can actually all be a little overwhelming at first, especially since all but the arrange mode have 3 difficulty options, with these difficulty options, instead of purely speeding things up or increasing the bullet count, also offering variations to scoring and altering the way players are encouraged to play as well. However, while it can be bewildering at first, it's obviously absolutely excellent for long-term replayability, and my advice if you're picking this up for the first time would be just experiment a bit until you find a mode that clicks, and then work away at that to fully understand it before moving on to try each different combination of versions and difficulty to see the differences. So, just in case you didn't know, Mushihimesama is one of Cave's most famous danmakus, and sees you take control of a teenage girl called Reko as she battles massive swarms of bugs and the occasional bit of highly aggressive fauna. The theme and visuals were supposedly heavily inspired by the Hayao Miyazaki movie Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, and the backgrounds and artwork are some of the most atmospheric I think Cave ever produced. There's an almost painterly quality to a lot of the visuals, with the action variously taking place over the still and lichen-covered husks of giant centipedes, or inside a network of watery caverns that are literally dripping with atmosphere, and that put me in mind of first exploring Zora's domain in The Legend of Zelda. Stage 3 is particularly well known, taking place as it does almost entirely above a truly gigantic marching bug of some sort, with Reko having to fly up and down its sides, shooting off the various parts of its carapace until finally launching an assault on its exposed head and triggering the boss fight. It's a consistent and majestic experience, and that extends to the stage flow, with enemies coming in really perfectly measured, overlapping waves that to me really clearly show why I don't think procedurally generated shmups, as good as they can be, can ever match the deliberately planned pacing of the best arcade classics. And things are not completely relentless, by the way. You'll never find time to sit there and compose a text message with one hand, but there are little breathers, and mid-bosses in most stages mix the pace of things up too. These mid-bosses, as well as the actual stage end bosses, are often hinted at earlier in the stage with, for example, glimpses of their giant forms scuttling through the undergrowth briefly visible as you focus on the more imminent danger of the swooping hordes of popcorn enemies. Everything is aided by perfectly fitting music, and there are actually 3 different soundtracks available here, with the sound menu giving you the option not just to select which one you like best overall, but to choose individual tracks for individual stages and customize the audio exactly as you wish. I tend to just leave things as intended, but I do have a fondness for the 1.5 soundtrack, which introduces an Eschatos-esque bounciness and energy to things, although it never quite reaches the heights of brilliance of Eschatos itself. In terms of gameplay, the basics ought to be pretty familiar to anyone who's played a cave shooter before. You have a regular shot button and a focus shot button that slows your movement, with a third button being used for bombs. Although Rekko is the only character, at the start of each game you select from 3 shot styles, with this choice also affecting movement speed. Power-ups come in 2 main types, one increases the power of your shot, and the other reading either trace or formation and providing options that either follow Rekko as she moves or line up either side of her. Additional bombs can also be collected, usually just before each boss fight. Personally, I favourite the more powerful blue shot, as the options can provide you with width, and the extra speed boost is very welcome. Scoring mechanics are nowhere near as intricate as many of Cave's works, but there are a variety of systems on offer depending which version and difficulty you've selected. With so much variety, it would take too long to go over everything, so I'll just give the basics and link to both the Hardcore 101 article on the game and an Electric Underground video for anyone who wants more details. Basically, there are 2 main variations you're going to find. One increases your score depending how much amber you've picked up, amber being left behind by defeated bugs, and the other granting more points depending on how many shots you've managed to land on enemies without any major interruptions. Since both mostly rely on you killing as many enemies as you can and not dying or bombing, they don't make playing for score as different from survival play as it sometimes is. Although there is one further aspect that elevates the scoring beyond its seeming simplicity. That aspect is the cancel system, which sees all enemy bullets on screen changed to amber at the moment of death of certain enemies. Learning which enemies grant cancels first of all is going to be of importance, and then obviously timing those kills for not just maximum impact in terms of scoring, but also maximum gratification, as hitting a massive cancel just as the walls are closing in on you can be immensely satisfying. A little bit of advice for people experimenting with the different versions. Novice, while being well adjusted so it's neither too difficult for novices nor a total cakewalk, does lack the bullet count to make cancels feel particularly good, and therefore it misses something vital that makes this game such a favourite. With that in mind, I would actually recommend playing Novice on Manic difficulty, since that still keeps things perfectly manageable, while upping the bullet volume to a level that is going to allow novice players to also enjoy something closer to the full experience. In terms of overall difficulty, of course this is a hard game, and it's often used to grab those insane screenshots filled with purple bullets for use in memes, but those are usually taken on the ultra difficulty setting, and on normal this is not as punishing as a lot of other cave games. It's not easy, of course it is not easy, but it's manageable, and while the difficulty does creep up as you progress through the stages, it doesn't spike to ludicrous levels. It's also pretty forgiving in the way it allows you to easily recover your powers upon death, and with rather generous scoring requirements for granting extends. Boss fights in particular, and I'm not counting the TLB here, should be eminently manageable for most decent players. And personally, I find the pre-boss sections in stages 3 and 4 to be the most difficult parts of the whole game. Speaking of which, while the game does offer training options, it only separates by stage rather than stage segment, making these end of stage sections a bit difficult to practice. However, one thing I do really like is that even outside training, restarting from the pause menu takes you to the start of the current stage, which I think is a pretty convenient feature. Doing this will, of course, void your score, but somewhat strangely, the game has launched without online leaderboards. I say strangely because the option is there in the menu, it just can't currently be accessed. And the same goes for replays. I haven't seen any comment from Livewire on this situation, but the fact the options exist surely suggests they will be activated before too long. And on the subject of replays, the game will ask you every game over if you want to save your replay or not, something I wish could be toggled off, as all in all, dying and finishing the game and restarting can actually take a bit too long. One solution I found, if you're looking to dive straight back in, is just to hit continue and then immediately call up the pause menu and exit the game that way, which in the end works out much faster. In general, the options the game offers are extensive. I already mentioned sound, but there are a plethora of visual adjustments available too, including the ability to add extra scoring statistics, visualizations of your inputs, or box outs featuring a zoomed in image of Reiko, as well as, of course, the always requested Tate mode. Training mode also allows you to set all sorts of in-game options. There are various backgrounds to choose from, the controls are easily remappable. One thing I would have liked to have seen here would be a couple of preset options, as you may wish to have different setups for different controllers or when playing in handheld, but it's not a huge hassle to make the changes yourself each time. Performance-wise, the game runs, plays and feels great. I'm sure someone will test the input lag and come out with a number, but from both my own experience and comments I've seen online from others, it seems as good as reasonably possible to get on Switch. There is a lot of slowdown in game, but this is just a replication of that found in the arcade, and while some people I'm sure would have liked an option to play without it, for me it's not really an issue. So all in all, this is pretty much everything we could have, and for many of us often did, dream of having available. On a purely personal level, this is one of my all-time favourite shmups. There are 3 arcades I've spent a lot of time in my life. One is Taito-hei in Tokyo, one is the sadly now shuttered Anata-no Warehouse in Kawasaki, and the other is Riehuo in Shanghai. Each of them had Mushihimesama, and it's probably the shmup I've spent most time playing sat down at an actual cab. Despite that, or maybe even because of that, having it available at home on Switch has been an absolutely delightful experience, and I'm already super psyched to get my hands on Livewire's upcoming releases of Espgaluda 2 and DFK, and hopefully maybe even more beyond. In the meantime, however, this is more than enough to be getting on with, and it's an excellent start to life for this new publisher. When it gets online leaderboards, it will be close to perfect. Until then, I would give it a 9 out of 10, and as mentioned at the top of the review, the price this is on offer for is outrageously good. So don't wait for a sale, don't wait for a physical, just go to the eShop and get it right now, you will not regret it. As ever, do share your thoughts on this and the upcoming Cave titles in the comments. What else would you most like to see Livewire bring across? I'll be honest, I don't really care, it's all good, especially if the quality remains as high as it is here. Thank you all, as ever, for watching. Hope to see you next time. Cheers.